How do you successfully co-parent? I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach all over the world about parenting, good communication, how to build strong family bonds, child development, and education, all through the lens of the principle self-government. And in this video, we're talking about successful co-parenting. In this video, we're going to talk about what co-parenting is. We got to make sure we're clear on that because there's multiple different definitions. And then we're going to talk about the best way to have a healthy co-parenting situation. All right, so let's define co-parenting. It's really talked about in a lot of different ways. So co-parenting traditionally meant, okay, there's one parent living here, there's another parent living here. They're both parenting the same child because the child goes back and forth. Because usually it was like a divorce situation. And that's what was meant by co-parenting. And I am going to be speaking to that today. In fact, I have quite a few videos on this channel related to raising children in a blended family or a divorced environment or separated parents, that type of thing. So we'll definitely talk about that. But it also could just refer to, in some people's minds, when they think co-parenting, they could be thinking, well, all right, I mean, I'm not parenting myself. I've got somebody else that I'm parenting with. So maybe it's a mother. Like maybe, okay, I'm a single mom and I've got my mom here and she's also parenting my child with me because I go to work sometimes and my child's with them. So then it's co-parenting, right? So we're co-parenting that way. Or maybe it's even just husband and wife. They both are there. They're both engaged in the parenting. So they're both co-parenting. Or it could be that we're thinking in terms of like, okay, my parenting style is super different than this other person's parenting style, so we're going to call it co-parenting because technically we got two different styles going on. I think the whole idea is that it's just not yourself, and that's how people think about it a lot of times nowadays. And so whatever I say in this video, it will be applicable to whatever your circumstance is, but I kind of want to dial it back and go to that traditional understanding of co-parenting. Maybe if you're in a separated relationship or a divorced relationship where the child is going back and forth between a parent. I mean, really, logistically, the big difference is we're at two different locations, but you could have the same thing happening in a home. In fact, on my TSG community, I answer people's questions every single week on my TSG community. You can find it at teachingselfgovernment.com. And on there are multiple people that are in situations that ask questions about, okay, I'm a parent who's trying to live teaching self-government skills and principles, but then one of the other parents are like, my spouse, my wife, or my husband is wanting to be aggressive with the children. Maybe the husband's aggressive. Maybe one father is saying, but my wife is super modern progressive. She just kind of lets the kids walk all over her and everything's just emotional. But I'm trying to teach them things and this is really hard. How do we do this together? And that can be really, really hard. Ideally, in a divorced or separated family situation, you would still try to be as mature as possible in your relationship and give your child some consistency if you can. One of the best things you can do for consistency is just learn the same skills. So here's the first step that I would suggest for you. If you can get both of you to a parenting mastery training, a teaching self-government parenting mastery training, whether you're married, whether you're a mom and a daughter, or a mom and a son, or whether you've been separated, say to each other, hey, let's try to teach our children the same skills. Like we each have the same children, let's teach them the same skills so that they don't have the worry and the frustration of having to adapt from place to place all the time. Let's do that for them. Ideally, if parents could get on the same page at parenting mastery trainings, which are the 3-day intensive trainings that I do a few times a year, that is the very best at helping them overcome that disparity between how the parents are parenting. Now, there's also a course, you can get the TSG Parenting Course, but if you just learn the skills, everyone needs to know how to disagree appropriately, how to follow instructions, accept no answers, accept consequences. They need to learn how to self-regulate themselves. Parents need to understand what is calmness. They need to know the tone elements that make a good family. They need to know how to communicate and work together, build the relationships, and be consistent in the corrections, and do it all with calmness all the time. That is possible. That is a package that I've put together now, and for many years, thousands and thousands of people have asked me, please teach this. That's why I'm here on this channel. It's why the BBC made movies of my family, and other, news shows and stuff have made TV shows of my family, because our family created a system working with troubled youth and with our children that actually works for every family everywhere, because it's principles that you need. It's principles and skills that usually people are lacking in those skills. So I know this sounds, probably just like a little bit too salesy. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to just tell you that it's really important that you get on the same page. And if you can attend a training together, all the better. But if not, what do? Children need their parents to love and support each other. So here's one of my rules that I always tell people. Okay, let's say you got dad over here and he's trying to teach skills and principles to the children. You got mom over here and she's really worried about their emotions. She doesn't want to teach them skills and principles because she doesn't like consequences. Dad likes consequences, mom doesn't like consequences. What do? Mom and dad love each other, but they're having a really hard time. This dynamic right now, right there, is going to be really difficult on their marriage. If dad's hitting and mom's worrying about their feelings, that's going to be even harder on their marriage, okay? So even if one person's making a change, it's going to improve things. How do you get over that? Because your children are going to play you against each other. One person, probably in this case, dad's going to be the bad guy because he's trying to hold people accountable, and that for them to have responsibility for, their behaviors and stuff, and they're going to earn negative consequences. And mom's going to be like, you're just too mean, and the kids are going to say, you're too mean. But then dad's going to be so frustrated that the kids keep getting into trouble because mom's not giving them boundaries. She's not wanting to stop them because she's being really modern progressive. What do? Mom and dad, at that point, if they can't come together on something, which is the ideal, they need to at least respect each other's interactions. They need to say, okay, well, you're having an interaction with the children. I guess you can do it your way. I'm going to have an interaction with the children, and I will do it my way. And when I'm in the middle of an interaction, you can't have an opinion on it. And when you're in the middle of an interaction, I'm not going to have an opinion on it. And that's how we're going to keep it. Which means that if I've done an interaction with the children and they come to you tattling, then that means you have to say, hey, listen, that's you and dad. You're working on that. And the same thing would happen if it occurred the other way with mom. That's you and mom. You're working on that. I'm not going to get in the middle of it. There will be a few problems that happen if you can't get on the same page. But there was a time in my own marriage, and here I am teaching all of this stuff, where I wasn't on the same page with my husband. My husband was emotional, a little bit more micromanagey, a little bit more aggressive, and I was trying to hold with skills and principles of self-government because I knew they worked. They had helped me, they had helped my children, they had helped all my foster children, but he got tired of it. And so about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, he just bailed. He stopped having effective communications and just started being emotional. I think he had a lot of stress going on in his life too. He was starting a business. There were a lot of things happening, but still, there wasn't really a great excuse, right, for him treating the family like he was. But I loved him, and so I decided not to talk bad about him with the children. I decided to just explain to the children, hey, I'm going to use these skills with you. And they'd say, yeah, but dad doesn't. What about him? He should use it. Well, I can't control what dad does, and each parent's going to be different sometimes, and so you're going to have to adapt to what dad does and to what I do. But if you're wise, you'll learn these skills like following instructions, accepting no answers and criticism, accepting consequences, disagreeing appropriately, and just use them with dad. He'll respect the skills probably most of the time. And so I just taught them that way, and then I prayed. I prayed that my husband would have a change of heart and a change of behavior. After 2 years of praying, one day he just sat down on the couch and went, ugh. And something inside me sparked. This is the moment, I told myself. So I said to him, what do you want? And he said, what do you mean, what do I want? That's a pretty broad question. And I said, I mean, you're clearly frustrated. What is it that you want? And he said, well, I just want them to do what I say. And I said, oh, okay. Well, just tell them it's an instruction. And then they'll do all 5 steps of following an instruction because they know how to do that. And he said, oh, that. And he said, well, yeah, you're probably right. They do always follow your instructions. They do everything you tell them to do, and they don't for me. So I guess I will do that. And then I said, you know, this was a really great couples meeting, because I'd been wanting to have family meetings with him, couples meetings. All of our meetings I was doing all on my own, and I didn't have his support. And he said, couples meetings? What do you mean? I said, well, you know, if we have regular couples meetings like we used to, then you can get a lot more of what you want. And he was like, And then suddenly he started being more deliberate. It was like he had to test it going the other way and really, really know he was going to fail. Remind himself that that other way wasn't helpful before he could know, okay, fine, I've questioned it for a year and a half, you know, or 2 years, whatever it was. I'm all the way in with these principles and these skills. And that's how it is sometimes with some people. Some people are stubborn. But one thing that I always told myself is I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing this for me and for my children. And I will be held accountable one day to my Maker for how I handled my stewardship with my children. I'm not going to stand before my Maker and say, well, he wouldn't get on the same page with me, so sorry, I ruined my kids. I have to do my best. And if I knew I could do better, I had to do it. But I had to have a calm, soft, humble heart, a charitable heart toward him the whole time. And that was probably the hardest thing. So I don't know what your co-parenting looks like, where you're at with that, but I sure would like to give you more help, because the teaching self-government skills and principles can help whether you're single parenting, whether you're on the same page, whether you're not on the same page in your co-parenting, whether you're divorced, whether you're blended family. It's worked for families all over the world in their different circumstances, and I would sure love to share that with you. There is a full-length class that's for free on this channel. I recommend you watching it next. It's called The Not-So-Known Secret for Parenting Success. If you could please click on the link to that video next. I'll see you there.